and Balanced Scorecards. Switch over. Okay, so I've actually been at SDI for over 4 years now, and in that time I've seen quite a few trends develop within ITSM, like enterprise service management, DevOps, and digital transformation. And at the core of these trends always seems to be improving the customer experience. And this has definitely developed over time, but service desk professionals are noticeably placing more importance on their customers and their experience of the service. Now, metrics are considered crucial to service desks by many, but there's been a shift in recent years which is changing how we think about metrics. More specifically, we're thinking about how we measure metrics and in turn, how we gauge value and success in relation to our customers and their experience of the service. So last year, SDI produced a report which looked at CX in greater detail, and I'll be using some of the data from this report as well as some others to support this presentation. If you're interested, the full report can be found on the Insight area of the SDI website, along with many other reports. And this is actually the second time that we have run this report, so that gave us an opportunity to do some trend analysis. So getting into the presentation itself, just a quick overview, I'll be discussing the difference between customer satisfaction and experience, though they are connected. And then I'll go over some stats from the report, followed by how service level agreements are becoming obsolete to support service desks looking to improve the customer experience, and how experience level agreements, or XLAs, are better suited to this, and how to establish key KPIs for forming XLAs. Finally, I will be talking you through the benefits of using a balanced scorecard and how you can create one. So while customer satisfaction and experience are connected, there is a difference between them, as I mentioned. Customer satisfaction focuses on how satisfied the customer is with one particular interaction with the service desk, whereas CX, or customer experience, looks at the customer's overall experience of the service. So it's much more proactive in encouraging service desk staff to build relationships with customers to promote customer loyalty and a positive perception of the service. Now, of course, customer satisfaction has an impact on experience, and so does customer perception. Perception is formed of factors both internal and external to the service desk, such as marketing, peers' perception, and individual experience. Customer perception is different to satisfaction. If a customer has one negative interaction with the service desk, that doesn't necessarily mean it would have an adverse impact on their perception of the service desk as a whole. However, consistent negative experiences for many customers can be detrimental for the perception of the service desk. But why should service desks be focusing on customer experience? Aside from all the fantastic stories we've heard today, arguably customers are less interested in whether their service desk met SLA targets for response time or first time fix for their ticket, which are more traditional metrics, particularly if their experience of the service wasn't better as a result. This isn't to say that traditional metrics don't matter or they don't have an impact on customer satisfaction. They definitely do. In fact, things like call wait times and resolution times are bound to have an effect, but there's more that goes into managing the customer experience than meeting targets. There is a fundamental flaw with setting targets for traditional measures, and that is that targets drive behavior. Service desk staff may focus more on meeting these targets and avoiding SLA breaches rather than focusing on the experience of the customer. CX measures, on the other hand, are almost impossible to cheat, with experiences being subjective to the customer. So using CX as a method of demonstrating value and success may be more meaningful and impactful for the business. Furthermore, excellent customer experience can build a community of customer advocates who can influence and promote services or processes to the rest of the business. Fostering an environment where the customer is at the center of the service can also lead to a more meaningful service and happier customers. And this can be relayed to the business as an indicator of value and success. I always find it's important to understand what industry professionals are focusing on, as not only does this help me tailor my content, but it also allows us to predict what the industry might look like in a year or two. When asked what main area their service desk would be focusing on in 2021, the largest proportion specified they will be focusing on automation of processes, tasks, and ticket handling. Now, this is understandable, as we've seen it across several SDI reports. Improving the efficiency and quality of IT services using automation has fast become a significant focus for organizations. 15% of respondents will look at focusing on their digital transformation journey. And it's undeniable that technology is having a significant impact on organizations, and having a digital strategy is integral to ensure that IT remains relevant and can evolve alongside developing technologies. Furthermore, particularly in 2020, the need to have an established digital strategy with steps put in motion was paramount to moving support to a remote workforce. It's important to note that digital transformation journeys can encompass a variety of things, and it will differ from organization to organization. Now, you're probably thinking, what's this got to do with customer experience? But ultimately, any focus the service desk may have should consider the impact on their customers as well as IT services. Now, it's important to involve key business stakeholders when looking to develop a strategy or project, including key customers, to understand how IT support can support the business and continually improve the customer experience. The data also showed that a customer-centric approach to service management will also be a significant focus area for this year. So let's take a look at some of the data from the CX report to give us an idea of the industry's attitudes towards customer experience. Now, positively, the proportion of service desk professionals measuring the customer experience has increased since 2018. However, while we can see that the majority still favors experience metrics, showing that CX is still important in the service desk industry, there has been some small and slightly unexpected movements regarding this question since 2018. Now, it would seem that a slightly smaller proportion of respondents find more value in customer experience measures than more traditional measures. Now, while this is potentially a step away from where we might expect the industry to be heading, this doesn't necessarily mean that service desks are turning their backs on customer centricity. For example, it's important for service desks to understand what their customers find important in terms of what shapes their experience. And if a service desk customers find that speed to answer or first-time fix is a key influence on their experience of the service, then the service desk should focus on ensuring they can meet their customers' needs in these aspects. And while these metrics may not be considered experience metrics, the importance is still placed on the customer's experience rather than service desk performance alone. Furthermore, while a large proportion of respondents are seeing a shift of focus towards monitoring CX over or alongside SLAs, a small proportion are seeing this within their service desk. Now, this is surprising considering a higher proportion are measuring customer experience, but perhaps one reason that could explain this dip is that the industry best practices have yet to consider moving from SLAs to XLAs in great detail. The report goes into some detail around collecting customer satisfaction and experience data, which I won't get into today, but again, please feel free to download the report if you're interested. But something which I will briefly discuss is how respondents are using their data. Now, for this question, we asked respondents to specify to what extent they agree or disagree with the statements. Now, as we can see, the majority of respondents would strongly agree that they share the data with IT, and a smaller majority share it within the business. Reporting the data back to IT or the business, be it a summary or the complete data set, can demonstrate the value of the service desk to the business and potentially act as a basis for a business case when attempting to gain buy-in for new projects. Provided, of course, that IT and the business understand what the reports signify. As such, it's important to ensure that reports provide as much context as the receiving stakeholder may require. Around 45% of respondents agreed that they share their experience targets, which can go some way to setting customer expectations. And perhaps as the uptake of XLAs increases, the proportion of service desk professionals who share experience targets will increase. Though 52% of respondents specified that they follow service experience continuously, only 44% agree that it's part of their culture. And this suggests that while many service desks may monitor the customer experience on an ongoing basis, they may not use this data to its full potential. And this theory may be supported by the fact that only 44% agree that they make data-driven decisions using experience data. Even if all the measures and reports indicate that the service desk is performing well, if customers aren't happy with the service, then this can cause issues for the service desk. Utilizing customer insight can allow IT support to identify ways to improve the service and enhance customers' experience. So clearly, service desks still have a long way to go in terms of utilizing CX data, but then again, that's why I'm here, to spread awareness of the power of customer experience. So I've thrown the term XLA or experience level agreement around a bit, but I haven't fully explained what it is. So similar to service level agreements, XLAs establish a typical level of service that a customer should receive. However, the difference is that XLAs focus on the customer experience and how the service desk is performing in relation to KPIs that are more directly related to what the customer sees, hears, and feels about the service, i.e. their experience. Among influencers and pioneering organizations, there's starting to be a common understanding that XLAs and SLAs can and need to coexist. XLAs can highlight the problem areas from the perspective of the customer, while SLAs can pinpoint process issues in those areas. From this data, we can see that just over half of respondents are familiar with XLAs. Now, given that XLA as a concept hasn't been around for a very long time in the grand scheme of ITSM, the pace at which the industry is becoming familiar with this is promising. A small proportion of respondents specified that while they've heard of them, they don't know what it means, which further shows the rate at which XLAs are being spoken about. One of the benefits that XLAs can carry is simply that employees will be happier. It's something that we've heard several times today, but service desk customers are most likely business employees, and the service desk can play a role in how happy employees are in their job. Happier employees lead to better retention and better productivity, and as employees are motivated to do work to their best ability. Secondly, there are some areas where SLAs can be flawed. I previously mentioned that targets can drive behaviours. So an example of this could be if a service desk analyst closes a ticket before it's resolved to meet the SLA target, when in reality, the incident is still an issue. The obvious issue with this is that analysts may be more concerned with performance metrics and meeting targets more than the customer experience. And this is sometimes known as the watermelon effect, where on the outside, everything looks to be meeting targets, but if you drill down into the metric, it shows a different story. An XLA would allow the analyst the time and space to be mindful of the experience of the customer and ensure that they are satisfied throughout their interaction with the service desk. Furthermore, XLAs can be a more effective way of monitoring the usability and efficiency of self-service or chatbot support channels, i.e. channels where the customer doesn't directly have contact with a member of support staff. Traditional metrics relating to these support channels may only skim the surface, whereas gearing KPIs or XLA targets towards a more customer-centric focus, the service desk could gain a better insight into the channels and highlight areas for improvement. It's worth noting at this point that becoming a customer-centric service desk won't necessarily happen overnight, and it will most likely require a culture change, if not within the service desk, then within the business. Certain organizations may be very focused on traditional metrics to measure performance. So if the service desk wants to implement XLAs, it may have to be alongside any existing targets or SLAs to report against for your business. And from there, you can grow and improve your service around your customers while still giving the business the data they want. Also, it's not a bad idea to continue to monitor both traditional and customer experience focused metrics, especially during a transition period, to make sure that other aspects of the service don't dip in quality while you're focusing on keeping your customers happy. Our data also showed that almost a fifth of respondents are using XLAs and SLAs in tandem. We can also see that SLAs are still held by the majority of respondents. And compared to results from the same question that we asked in our benchmarking report, which was released in 2019, a slightly higher proportion of this survey's respondents measure both SLAs and XLAs. And while a similar level don't measure either. This consistency shows that XLAs are growing in popularity and uptake, and though there is still some hesitation to abandon their more traditional counterparts, given that a significant proportion of the industry are still not familiar with XLAs, this slow uptake isn't surprising. How this develops over the next few years will be interesting to watch. One of the criticisms of using experience to monitor success is that it's not as black and white as more traditional metrics. However, an XLA can simply be made up of more CX-oriented metric targets or KPIs. For example, You could use average call wait times or response times, first time fix, percent of tickets resolved in a day, reopen tickets, etc., etc. And of course, daily or weekly CSAT levels. These metrics are not typically considered subjective. In fact, they're probably very similar to the metrics you already measure, but they're bundled together to help monitor the indicators of and influences on CX. So while traditional measures are still essential for monitoring your service desk performance, perhaps merging these two approaches and measuring both service desk performance and service quality will become the norm. The metrics you decide to use should be tailored to your service. So you could discuss what metrics your customers think affect their experience the most with customer representatives or advocates. And if you wanted to set targets to these metrics, again, you could talk to your customers to establish reasonable and mutually agreed upon targets for the service desk to work against. Now, I know I said before that targets drive behavior, but you may as well drive them in the right direction. Reporting and trending performance of these metrics and monitoring progress over time can also be used as a way to demonstrate value to customers and the business. And an extra bonus is that you already know the metrics are relevant to those stakeholders. Often, when a service desk attempts to communicate its performance to other stakeholders in a business, they can be confused about how to interpret the data. Without context, they may focus on one specific metric, which may not portray the service desk performance accurately, or perhaps they simply don't know what the data means, so they may not be able to fully understand how the service desk is performing. The latter can have an impact on the perception of the service desk, and the service desk may run into issues when trying to justify budgets or funding. A balanced scorecard, on the other hand, provides a more complete and accurate picture of the overall service desk performance. A balanced scorecard can be used as a way to track and trend service desk performance using key metrics and weighting them based on their significance for your service. It can be useful for monitoring performance against XLAs, as you're able to assess which metrics have the greatest impact on experience and measure performance against them. Now, it's important to engage your customers to discuss what metrics they believe impact their experience of the service most. Also, knowing what your customers place the most importance on when using your service, like resolution times or first time fix, as well as what's important for the service desk to monitor performance, can help you to decide the weightings of each metric. In this way, the service desk can begin to work towards becoming more customer focused and ensure staff place a greater focus on the experience of the customer to fully embed customer centricity into service desk culture. So there are a few steps to creating a balanced scorecard. In the next slide, I'll show you what one might look like, but the steps to building one are fairly simple. It just unfortunately involves a little bit of maths. So firstly, you would select the metrics that you're going to monitor. A good way of figuring this out is to include your customers, as I've mentioned, communicate with them and understand which factors impact their experience the most. You should also ask business stakeholders what metrics they are interested in monitoring. Using your knowledge of what metrics matter to different stakeholders can help you to establish their relative importance against other metrics to help you set a weighting. Now, this plays a vital role in the balanced scorecard because, for example, if your scorecard includes first time fix and bounce rate, but bounce rate plays less of a role in determining the customer experience, you'll want to place more importance or more weight on first time fix to produce your balanced scorecard. Next, you need to identify your best and worst performances for a specified time period. So if you're measuring your balanced scorecard for every month, record what your best and worst performance for each metric is that month. And then you'll put your average performance for the same time period. Now from there, you calculate your metric score using the formula on screen, and then calculate your balance score based on what the metric's weighting is. So if your metric score is 54% and your weighting for that metric is 20%, you do 54 multiplied by 0.2 and your balance score would be 11%. The final step is to total your balance scores to give your service desk an overall score for the specified time period. And once you're done, it might look something like this. Your balance score can then be tracked over time, so month to month, for example, to trend service desk performance and monitor improvement. And essentially, it can serve as a benchmark. Now, on the topic of benchmarking, there are a few methods to benchmark your service, including benchmarking against a service desk which closely matches your own in terms of size, industry, and number of customers. And while this provides an outside perspective and allows the service desk to monitor themselves against a potentially better performing service desk, every organization is different, and focusing on matching or outperforming another service desk in one area can have a detrimental impact on another area of your service. Furthermore, it may be difficult to find a service desk similar enough to yours to effectively use them as a benchmark. And that is assuming that they would be willing to share their performance data with you. And yes, it can be a good way of understanding how you're performing against other service desks or within an industry. But if you're focusing too much on this method, you can end up causing more harm than good for your service. A safer, easier, and more effective way of benchmarking your service is simply to benchmark against yourself. By using your own performance data, you can identify areas of your service which can be improved, and you can also monitor improvements based on your performances from previous months, which can ultimately be used as a way to demonstrate value to the business. A balanced scorecard provides a comprehensive and easily measurable way to measure and benchmark your service's performance. So that brings me to the end of my session. If I had one key takeaway from today, it's that XLAs don't need to be complicated. It can simply be made of the KPIs that you're probably already measuring against, like average response time, first time fix, and so on. But it's more about putting focus on the metrics which have an impact on the customer experience. Taking the time to ask your customers what they think are the most important metrics could be a good first step in establishing XLAs and becoming more customer-centric. And above all, it's important to understand that customer experience is made up of more than just meeting targets. It's understanding that your customers want to be able to do their job in the most efficient way, and they want the business to provide them the services to do that. Working with your customers to make your service better for them could have many benefits for the service desk and the wider business. So thank you for listening to me today. If you have any questions, my contact details are on screen. We're now going to go for a quick break, and we'll be back at 2:15 with Jeff Romberg from MetricNet.